Hi everyone. Thank you for coming down to the open meeting. This is obviously about Selwyn's affiliation to CUSU. The voting goes live tonight, but before we do that, we thought we'd come together and discuss some of the arguments for and against. I'm the returning officer for this referendum, which means that I am neutral. So I won't be taking a public stance on this. And I also moderate this debate. So it goes without saying that be polite to each other, don't interrupt each other. In the past, genuinely 3 years ago, these got quite nasty. So if we could not repeat that and it could just be a discussion, that would be fabulous. We obviously have some visitors. First, I'll go from left to right. We have Fliss, who is president of Corpus, and is here actually to be neutral because they're running a referendum at the same time, so she's here to observe the discussion and contribute any information that she can. And then we have some visitors from Gonville and Caius, so this is their president, Paige Walker, and Kate Reply, their vice president, who is just going to come in and speak about what it's like to be a JCR that's disaffiliated. We have Amatey Doku, who's the CUSU President. I don't know what side it's going to take, so in history to us all. And Guy Lambert, who is obviously Access Officer on Selwyn JCR, and they're going to speak for affiliation, the re-affiliation to CUSU.
Guy is also now on the part-time exec.
Oh yeah, as well, and she's now a part-time exec at CUSU starting next year, so who knows how she's going to operate. Let's kick off. Paige, would you like to start?
Yeah, so basically, Gonville and Caius disaffiliated before we even started at uni, so it was about 4 years ago, we're 30 now. So we have no knowledge of how a JCR runs being part of CUSU. So we're literally just here to say how we run not being part of CUSU. So Caitlin's got a few reasons, knows the reasons as to why we disaffiliated in the first place.
Yeah, so I've looked at the meetings, the open meeting we had at the time, which was pretty similar to this. We had CUSU President there and also CUSU President at the time. This was in 2013 actually, I think. So yeah, November 2013. Basically, there were two main reasons that we used as a platform to disaffiliate from CUSU. Firstly, that obviously individuals are still part of CUSU. Individuals can still take part in CUSU elections, vote for CUSU, be at the CUSU position, access welfare supplies, go to welfare events. So we felt that we weren't restricting our members on anything that they could individually access. And secondly, I don't know how this is different in other colleges, but I know that we actually pay the CUSU affiliation fee directly from our budget. And we just saw this massive chunk of like over £3,000 go that we could see ourselves investing directly into our student body. So most of our money was actually going to societies. And we felt that we could make a bigger impact on our students by actually spending their money directly. At the time they had a massive look at CUSU's finances. Obviously I don't know how they are now. But the argument was like it was spending like hundreds of pounds a year on like office costs and staff costs and tea and coffee and all these things and like staff socials, and Keith just felt why we're spending money on this when we could just spend it on our students in our college. So we had a referendum at the time. I think it was passed like 70% in favour, something like that. Yeah, that's all I have to know.
So yeah, at the minute, we don't notice any negatives necessarily as not being part of CUSU. So I think the only big things CUSU could offer is anything to do with welfare. I know a few years ago there were issues with our welfare officers accessing like resources and training sessions and stuff like that, but our current officers aren't noticing any different. They can still attend welfare sessions and they're fine with it. We can still access welfare supplies like condoms, etc., but we found that, our officers found that it's just a lot more hassle, just in the fact that they have to actually go to CUSU and the number that they can get is low. So we actually buy our own condoms and things to supply students because it's just easier for us.
But still more cost effective.
More cost effective. So yeah, at the minute we function perfectly well without CUSU. We don't necessarily know any reason why we would re-affiliate because we have very, basically.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Amatey, do you want to take the floor?
If anyone asks a question.
Just two questions.
I do actually have a question.
Should we do questions
Should we do
after
questions
the-
after they all speak? We can ask questions. That's okay. Amatey?
Yeah, I mean, I won't take too long because I think Q&A is probably the most important bit. But I just thought I'd briefly say, just very briefly does and how it's different from what JCRs do, like completely different from what JCRs do to some extent. You have the colleges and you need college representation, that's very, very important. So there is a university out there and they make very important decisions that affect all students, and there needs to be representation at that level as well. So that's where we come in. So we sit on, last time we counted over 100 university committees, where really important decisions in terms of teaching. So for example, the new digital learning strategy, which is being rolled across all faculties, talking into that. And stuff to do with government legislation as well. Obviously, hopefully something out in Europe quite soon, detailing CUSU's response, Pastor CUSU Council CUSU's response to the new teaching excellence framework, which the government is trying to roll out, which we are opposing. So they're very, very different things which at the college level, and I've worked on JCR before, you just can't really respond to those things because we are focusing on students in college and college matters, but actually you do need that representation at university level for those sorts of things. And really importantly, actually, the new harassment policy. So there was a huge gap in harassment, including sexual harassment policies across collegiate Cambridge, and especially in instances where you had individuals at different colleges, because individual colleges couldn't do their own thing, and actually there's no university-wide thing. So we've been inputting into that and we've been communicating that to students. So I think it's really important to understand the difference between what CUSU does and what JCRs do. But the other thing I would say is that, at the moment, if you take Selwyn, for example, the master, the senior tutor, the bursars, the porters, the nurses, the HR manager, all of them talk to all the other to all the other equivalents in different colleges. They all have forums, they all have committee meetings, they all share information, and it just seems a bit odd not to also mirror that. It's really, really important that we're working together, we're sharing best practice across collegiate Cambridge, and I think that's part of what, sort of speaking from mainly the president's and the vice president's point of view, you've got the Facebook group, which CUSU moderator set up. We've got presidents and externals meetings, which happen just before CUSU councils, where they can share information. And hopefully, if all goes to plan, next week I'm launching a Moodle online resource where budgets, where all sorts of information can be shared, and where we can see what's happening in other colleges. Should we have this at Selwyn? Should we, be having that? How much are people spending on that sort of thing? So it's really, really important, in my view, that CUSU can be there to facilitate those networks as well. But then really importantly, CUSU Council. I think CUSU Council is really important, and that is perhaps most tangibly what you are giving up your seat in deciding what CUSU actually campaigns on and what CUSU actually does. Some of you may or may not know there's a £5,000 CUSU Council free budget, over £5,000 which CUSU can spend on any policies or any campaigns that come to council. Last year, the Islamic Society, if you believe it, didn't have a place for Friday prayers, and came to CUSU Council to ask for funding to facilitate that process, and that came out of the budget, and all JCR affiliated members had the chance to vote for that kind of thing. And when it comes to the training and the welfare and that sort of thing, it's if and when you need it, frankly. And with there, it's about making sure. They may be absolutely fine at the moment. There may be no major issues with colleges, but it's amazing how a change of staff, a new person coming in who isn't very sympathetic towards students, can have such a big difference in impact. It's really important that your JCR is plugged into the network, so they can find out what other colleges are doing. So that's sort of, again, we've also got the CUSU Autonomous campaign, which is absolutely vital to what CUSU does, and there's just so many different things, so many different levels. But I'm sure there'll be opportunities to talk about that in the Q&A.
Thank you.
Yeah, so basically I'd kind of like to echo a lot what Amatey said, but mostly from a sort of student perspective of someone. So last year when I started as JCR officer, I didn't know a lot about CUSU, but having basically worked with them for about a year in the role of JCR, I've kind of come to learn how absolutely fundamental it is to have a good working relationship with CUSU. So essentially, in terms of access, I personally feel like we can't run effectively unless we have the support from CUSU, because as Amatey was saying, we have forums all the time that basically enable all of the access officers to come together, share ideas and resources, and basically work as well together as we possibly can. I think that one of the main things about student representation is that we have to work together across the university to like basically function as a representative body. I think it works both ways in terms of, I've heard some arguments of disaffiliation that are like, oh, we don't need CUSU. I don't think we talk to CUSU enough to warrant staying affiliated with them. Personally, I think that that's on us as well. We need to keep a good communication with CUSU. This year, I think the JCR certainly worked really well in improving communications, and I think that we've seen the effects of that. Purely from an access perspective, the shadowing scheme is the main thing that we do associated with CUSU. We've gone from last year where we had 2 student mentors from Selwyn to this year where we've got 36, and that really feeds into like all of the work that we do in terms of access. We're going to be helping a lot more students from disadvantaged backgrounds solely because we've improved the working relationship with CUSU, and I see absolutely no point in letting that drop now. I think we're always better off working together.
I'm really, really keen to make sure that we ask questions first to Caitlin and Paige because they do have to dash off. Does anyone have a question specifically for them? Alex?
Hi, so I'm a male welfare officer at Selwyn, and it just happens that a really, really close friend of mine was a welfare officer at Caius, and I talked to him a lot about this, and he presented a very different perspective to what you guys presented, and so I just sort of wanted to ask you about that maybe. For starters, and then sort of talk maybe quickly about what I think is really important we affiliate. But with resources and stuff, he was saying that CUSU does sort of allow you to go individually, but that means your welfare officers can only pick up 12 condoms each, and that's anyone can do that anyways. So obviously as a welfare officer, you're not going to do that, and you will spend the money. He also said that once you disaffiliated, the college actually took that as an excuse to cut your budget a bit, and so where over the last 4 years, the college has shrunk your budget, and you haven't actually saved a huge amount of money by disaffiliating, and the money you've been spending on things like condoms doesn't really even out that much. And I think it's a really flawed argument to say that you don't want to reaffiliate because you're doing just fine now, because I don't think you or your welfare officers could really know how helpful CUSU can be. And Eleanor, who's the female welfare officer, I mean, we had training all through Nicholas last year and built a really solid relationship.
Just maybe in your answers, you could also answer, do you know, or maybe Amatey knows what kind of training exactly is available to welfare officers if she disaffiliated?
Should we give them a chance?
Yeah, if you would, yeah.
Okay, so I'm not saying that we are strongly against reaffiliating. At the minute, we're not really in a position to say either way because we function fine. So we have no incentive to either stay disaffiliated or reaffiliate. We've got no strong opinion really. In terms of welfare, so we source our own condoms and things now because the welfare officers said that was just easier. In terms of our budget, as far as I'm aware, I don't think it has been cut as such. I think the agreement that was made at the time of disaffiliation was that the money that we were spending on CUSU was just coming straight into our budget so we got that into our budget rather than having to spend it on CUSU. I think we don't have a very strapped budget at the minute. We do have a sufficient amount. We're not suffering because we have to pay for condoms and things. In terms of what training the welfare officers get, I'm not exactly sure on the details. They just go back to me that they can go to what they feel they need to go to and what they want to go to. They're perfectly happy with what they can access. So I'm not entirely sure on the details of that, but they don't feel like they're lacking anything.
Yeah, they said they do go to CUSU training, specifically welfare training events.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's what they said. Just one more point that I think at the time, and we feel this way now, is that we don't have any ideological issues with CUSU. It was always a financial argument, and to this day still is.
Yeah, and actually I think
we greatly appreciate the work that CUSU does for students.
I think we can probably function without being affiliated because so many other colleges are. I think so. For example, if everybody's affiliated, I think everyone would be in a worse situation. But I think at the minute, the current situation, we function fine.
Can I just add how
years ago, went back through loads of documents to kind of find a clause somewhere that said that we would still have access to sexual health supplies because of that levy. So like, and also we're really close to CUSU, like it's like pretty much next door to our college, so it's not a lot of hassle. So like that's just how we do our sexual health supplies. But we have done some things separately. So for instance, to be able to store and look after sexual health supplies, you're supposed to get proper training. Last year's CUSU SAB team didn't want to give us that training, so we went to another charity that offered to do that for us, and then they sent an email to CUSU that said these guys know how to handle condoms, like you can let them come and take your stuff. And then in terms of getting just general welfare training, they had like extensive training with our college counsellor, who's not affiliated to our college or university, but she works in our college on Tuesdays and Fridays. And then also, and then also they got other stuff done from the charity that did the condom training as well. So that's kind of how it works. And we haven't moved into CUSU for any of that stuff.
I'm very keen to keep things very balanced in this debate. Does anyone have a point to make against CUSU?
I have one specific point actually that we wanted to raise with you guys, is that we brought up on the condom issue, like just the whole debate about condoms, that we've just had a very large number of complaints that they've broken. So that's just something that, and I have brought it up with Sophie, but CUSU can, okay. Apparently they're too expensive to like upgrade to new ones, so that would be one area where it would be like,
good condoms, like
yeah, because there's no, yeah, I don't feel uncomfortable giving out condoms to people when we know that they will probably,
not probably, there's a likelihood they might break.
Okay.
yeah, so that might just be like one argument against that we could spend that money on condoms that didn't break, but I'm actually in favor for re-affiliation. Just wanted to put that out there.
So, just give me 2 seconds, I promise. So I sent out, as some of you might have read earlier, an email to the student body asking people to submit responses to me that I can read out anonymously if they felt that they want to come and raise their points at a meeting. That also extended to outside college, and I did get a response from someone who is a welfare officer at a disaffiliated college. And I'm just going to read it out, just because I think it raises a lot of discussion points. So it says, CUSU have treated this college very badly in the past, which is largely why we disaffiliated. Since disaffiliation, they have continued to treat us badly. It is a large amount of money to be affiliated with CUSU, and to be honest, you don't get very much for it. Almost everything CUSU offers, individual students still get because individual students are members of CUSU regardless of if their college is affiliated. Things like sexual health supplies and access to the student advice service, for instance. Other things CUSU offer that we don't get, we now do better. We get better welfare training and run better consent workshops. The money we don't spend on affiliation also goes towards our sports and societies budget, and it goes a very, very long way. The main drawback from not being in CUSU is that we don't get a vote on a few committees, but these committees are funded anyway. For example, one of the committees we didn't get a vote on is the committee that unanimously voted to get rid of class lists, only to have that decision overturned by the student body. By not being affiliated to CUSU, a JCR is making a statement that CUSU is not delivering what they should be. If CUSU started delivering, it could make sense to re-affiliate. CUSU doesn't deliver on its promises, an example of which is 5 years ago, Oxford Union abolished affiliation fees, and CUSU has still been saying every year they will do the same, but they haven't. It was rated the 3rd worst student union last year.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah.
So at a recent CUSU council, there's, and Amatey will be able to tell you this as well, like, there's been a huge incentive to get rid of this financial argument. So being like, oh, CUSU isn't like worth our money, like we're not getting our values worth. There are genuinely policies that are about to be passed to change that. So that's what I'd say about that. I also just personally think it's a flawed argument to claim CUSU's bad because of what previous presidents' SAB committees may or may not have been like. And I personally think there's a big difference between the pre-Priscilla era and the post-Priscilla era. And I don't think people should, I just disagree with that. But my main point is like trying to not make this a financial argument like value for money, because there are going to be changes to the affiliation fees, and it's more about whether you want to be involved in this wider network of JCRs and support and training and advice and votes on important councils, or if you want to sit and think about value for money. That's my view.
I would like to quickly add to that and say that I think that CUSU are deeply underfunded as it is, and ultimately they do an incredible job with the money and resources that they have. So to disaffiliate and then say that we're still going to latch onto their welfare provision or latch onto their, training and stuff, which they could really do with more money as it is, I think is a sort of, it's just counterproductive.
CUSU is actually receives the least funding out of all unis in the UK or in England.
In the Russell Group.
In the Russell, out of all unis in the Russell Group, CUSU receives the lowest amount of funding.
Interject. Lily, you haven't spoken yet. Do you want to?
Yeah, well, it's just like on the same point, but I guess I was going to speak from like someone who works in liberation campaigns and like on a lot of like political campaigns in Cambridge, just to say that like CUSU is actually really helpful in terms of providing the liberation campaigns with networks so that we can disseminate information to different JCRs and different JCR presidents, and I think that and officers as well, that comes into like which colleges actually engage with like the women's campaign, the BME campaign, which colleges actually know what's happening, and there's like a big disparity between colleges obviously who are affiliated to CUSU and colleges who aren't. The sexual assault policy, for example, the women's campaign has been working on that for like more than 3 years, and now it's like with the help of CUSU and because of last year's SAB committee, it's like on the way, it's like here, and now it's just about making sure that we utilise the networks that affiliated colleges have to make sure that like colleges actually stick to the promises that they've made, and we can't do that if like colleges are, like our college is outside of that network, and I think for sexual assault that's like one of the most important things, and so like I think a lot of people are always like, oh, CUSU doesn't do anything for me personally, but it does like the autonomous campaigns in relation to CUSU do tireless work for like marginalised students, and so I think that's like something that we should be taking into account, even if you feel that CUSU doesn't personally affect your every waking moment. It does actually help students who are isolated in their colleges.
I don't want to put my hand up on the chair, sorry. I could just say, again, does anybody have a point against CUSU affiliation, please? Okay, because I have a duty.
It's not against it, but I'm genuinely interested. What is the kind of point of protecting your right to vote in all these committees if all the committees seem so grossly misaligned with the general views of the student population anyway? So you say, oh, it's really good if our JCR officers get to vote on these committees and make all these decisions, but if they're making decisions that keep getting overturned in referenda, then it doesn't look very good. Alright, guys, I was just asking an actual question.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question, and I raised this as an issue when I announced to council the result of the referendum. There is only one committee, so the fact that the number of committees, I think it's like, CUSU officers sit on a number of committees, but actually in terms of JCRs representing students, it's one committee, and that's CUSU Council.
Yeah.
In that specific instance, like, as far as I'm aware, this is the first time this has ever happened that a referendum has overturned. Because normally it's either one or the other. You either have a referendum or you take the council. But this was. But what I would say, and it comes back perhaps to the pre-Priscilla era matter. Actually, at the time, CUSU Council wasn't in the minutes. You couldn't see which way people were voting. There wasn't really a way of getting the information about what's happening at CUSU Council if you weren't sort of in on it, as it were, and if you had to then rely on your representatives and your individual colleges to disseminate that information. And yeah, I can totally see how that decision may have been made in the way it was, but also got to take into account that the circumstances are very, very different a year ago and that sort of thing. So there are lots of things at play, but what we've done now is that one of the first things that was set up a mailing list so that if you want to find out what's happening at CUSU Council, you can get on the mailing list and everyone has access to that. We now chart exactly which way your representatives voted at every council meeting so that you can hold it to account. So we're doing a lot of different things to make sure that it is being as representative as possible.
Obviously, you two, Paige and Caitlin, you are welcome to stay until the end, but I know that you have to leave, so just feel free to leave at any point.
I have any more questions.
I had a question for Paige and Caitlin, if that's okay. I'm Selwyn Treasurer, by the way, I'm Phil. While the financial issue may soon no longer be an issue. I'm wondering what financial benefits you guys have noticed, what you've been able to invest more in since you disaffiliated.
It's kind of a hard one for us to answer because we haven't experienced like affiliation, what it's like to be affiliated, and the budget in that situation. I just know that we have a larger budget now for our societies, as we are sports clubs and other societies, which we can invest more in.
We've invested more in welfare. We've got big plans to renovate our JCR as well, which is our space, so we have to spend that money. And we felt that that was such an integral part of college life. Our JCR is quite underused, so we felt it was really important to renovate and bring everyone in college together in one place again. So that's what we're using that money for, which obviously is quite a lot of expenditure.
Yeah, but we just noticed that we do have the extra money to spend on other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
Again, any points against CUSU?
I just wanted to ask you, would you say now that you would struggle to meet the affiliation costs if you were to re-affiliate? Has your budget realigned in such a way that you now have certain expenditure that just sort of goes on other things and you would have to make cuts elsewhere to be able to re-affiliate?
I'm not entirely sure.
Do you understand?
I think at the moment it's hard to say because we are planning this JCR project and we haven't looked at the cost right yet.
Cool.
Yeah, I just don't think
But we are kind of working to the limit of the project.
Yeah, I just don't think in the past few years there's been any need to look into that really at Keys.
Yeah.
There's been no drive from members of college or any members of the JCR to actually look into whether we can afford to re-affiliate or whether we should. So we haven't actually looked into
that's
much detail.
kind of an important point about like affiliation referendums, and now that's done. Now that everyone who is an undergraduate at Keys has never experienced life of CUSU affiliation, I think it'll be very difficult for us, even if as a JCR we felt we should re-affiliate. I think it would be very difficult to convince our student body to vote that way. So I think that's that's kind of speaking against like our position, but since we don't really have an opinion, I think like once you have disaffiliated and several years have passed, it's really difficult to motivate the students to make that change again. So I think like that's an important point to consider. And I don't think if we start this referendum now, like we want to re-affiliate, unless we have very strong reasons like you change the financial structure and we don't have to pay that money anymore. I don't really see key students voting to re-affiliate, which is
Okay, actually introduce yourself.
Introduce
yourself.
I'm Louis, I'm from Varsity. I've got a quick like one information for one question, that's alright?
Yeah.
So the first one would just be like, I understand that Amatey's working at the moment, but I think the budget changes and the levy changes aren't quite, I don't think they should be considered to be something that's absolutely through the air. I'm sure you noticed too, you've put forward to council, you encounter a lot of questions and you're working on it at the moment. So I think like a pending levy change is something that people should consider to be something that's at least delayed at the moment. I think that's fair to say. I mean, I'm happy to respond to that. I mean, like it's not like there's about to be a levy change. It's being worked on and it's not like gliding through the versus committee either. So yeah. And my question was more so for the representatives from Keys. It's kind of a dickish question, but that's kind of I guess what I do. I'm right in saying that 2 of your welfare officers intermitted, right, in the past year, didn't they? Or very recently, you've had 2 welfare officers intermit. I mean, it's obviously a proper question, but do you think, given the welfare officers probably get under more pressure than any other JCR members, do you think lacking a central support network could have been a factor in that?
I think it's a very personal issue for them. I mean,
Of course, yeah.
I think this is not